This episode contains several instances of foul language. Listener discretion advised.
Matt Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd. For the layup, it's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to the Rebound Podcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this podcast, we discuss leadership and overcoming adversity in an open and raw kind of way. I became passionate about leadership in 2003 after I lost my job as the head coach at my alma mater, the University of North Carolina. I went on a leadership journey. Leadership is a skill that needs to be practiced on a continuous basis. With the start of March Madness, I decided there may be no better guest than former Clemson point guard and sneaker company rep than Merl Code. Merl Code played college basketball in the 90s at Clemson, then got into the sneaker business. First as a rep for Nike, then Adidas. Merl had a great reputation as an evaluator of talent, a hard worker, and a relationship builder. His job was to uncover the best young talent in high school basketball and develop relationships so they would join the Nike or Adidas family and play for a college program sponsored by these companies. You see, he got these young players to wear the shoes of his employer that would help sell shoes at the grassroots level. And if someone broke it big, like LeBron or Kobe, it could mean millions of dollars for the sneaker company. As a college basketball coach, I needed to be close to guys like Merl because he could provide me with key intel that would help me make decisions in the recruiting process. If Merl liked me and thought I was a good fit for his player, he might influence the player my way. I needed Merl Code. The sneaker companies needed Merl Code. The high school AAU programs needed Merl Code. Merl was in the middle of it, in the middle of the cesspool called college basketball. Merl, welcome to the Rebound Podcast.
Thank you, Matt, for having me.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you. If you don't mind, I'd love to go through your timeline. I have you down as born to judge Merl Code in Greenville, North Carolina.
South.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Greenville, South Carolina.
Gotcha. And your dad played football, is that correct?
Yes.
At North Carolina A&T?
Yes.
And became a municipal judge, the first African-American to serve in that position.
Yes.
And then you played at Clemson from 93 to 97?
Yes.
Played with the Nuggets for a little bit and then some other professional leagues?
Yes.
And then after that, tell me what happened from that point on and how you got to Nike.
Yeah, so I actually, my cousin, who I'm very close to, his name is Ron Blassingame, had gone to college, and one of his closest friends was a guy named Lynn Merritt. And Lynn had come down to see Grant Hill. He and a guy named Taderma Ussery. And Taderma Ussery actually was at Nike at the time and ended up becoming an executive for the Dallas Mavericks. Long story short, we played Duke in the first round of the ACC tournament. Actually the second round, because we were in the play-in game. And those guys were there to see Grant. I played in the game as a freshman. I didn't do anything spectacular. I just got some minutes. Those guys ended up calling my cousin, Ron, and said, "Hey, man, your cousin really can't play." And so, he said, "I've been telling you guys he can play for a long time." And that kind of sparked and started the relationship when I was in college. And so during the summer months, I would go out to the Bay Area and work out with guys like Tim Hardaway and J.R. Ryder and Jason Kidd and Richard Jefferson. And all of those guys. Richard was actually in high school at the time. But I would go out west and work out with those guys and work their camps. And so it was kind of my start into the relationship building process with the Nike hierarchy. And so when I decided to hang him up after, 4 knee operations and back killing me and everything else, and you know, Matt, as a player, how your body starts telling you it's time to stop.
Yep.
I kind of wanted to figure out kind of what was next for me. And I never really had any desire to coach per se. I love teaching. I just didn't like the other things that came with coaching, in terms of the politics of the coaching decisions from an AD or a president perspective, being forced to recruit certain players because their moms and dads went to a school, or giving them a scholarship because their mom and dad were big time donors. I just didn't want to get in. I just didn't like that part of the business.
Yep.
And so I just said, you know what? It's not really something. I love the game. I just didn't want to be a part of that. Well, little did I know, jumping into the shoe business was designed.
You got in it.
I got in it. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I got in it. So I called everybody just to thank them, along my journey. Everybody that had been a part of my process, from Little League to high school, to college, to professionally. I just called everybody kind of a roundabout way just to say, hey, thank you for taking this ride with me. It's been a wonderful ride. Any and everything you've done for me, from, my godfather, Johnny Jones, who was
Johnny Jones at LSU?
No. Johnny Jones, who was at South Carolina State and Florida A&M. He's a legendary high school coach in Alabama. But his son is actually Orlando Jones, the famous actor.
Okay.
But Johnny is my godfather and spent numerous hours with me in the gym working on my ball handling skills and helping me understand the game. And so he's just one of those people that I just had to, Coach Aaron at Fort Union. All of those guys, may he rest in peace. I just wanted to thank everyone along my journey. And so I called Lynn to say, hey, man, I thank you and appreciate you allowing me to come to work those camps. It was a wonderful opportunity to see what pros do during the off season and how they work, and getting a chance to play with those guys and really felt like I belonged. And he asked me, what was I going to do? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know. And he said, well, have you ever thought about coming to work for Nike? And I said, no, because I really don't want to sell any shoes. Because in my naivete, right, I did not understand the business of shoes. I thought, Nike just put some shoes in the store and everybody just went to buy them. I didn't understand the business around it.
You were pretty naive, right?
Extremely.
We all were.
Extremely. So I said, no, thank you. I don't want to sell any shoes, man. I appreciate it, though. And he said, that's not kind of what I do. And he said, well, I tell you what, why don't you come out, meet me at the All-American camp in Indianapolis. Let me show you kind of what we do. And if you think it's something that you might be interested in, let's make a consulting arrangement for a year. And then if that works, then we'll turn it into something full time. And if it doesn't, no hard feelings. You tried it. We tried it. Didn't work. And I was kind of like, well, why me? And he said, well, listen, I don't have a lot of people in this department who really know the game. I don't have guys who play the game or have relationships with coaches or players that you do. You played at a really high level. You know these guys. They know you. They respect you because you were on the floor. You just weren't some guy on a team. You played. Right. And so it would be of benefit to me. And again, it could help you kind of start your own career outside of the court instead of playing.
What year was this, Merl?
This would have been 02, 03, somewhere in there.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a good 4 or 5 years after you were done.
Yeah. Because I bounced around the CBA. I bounced around the G League. I bounced around Europe. Like, I bounced around playing, and I still love to play. But again, my body was kind of telling me it was time for me to stop. And so that led me down this path. And so I ended up doing the consulting gig as a rep for that first year, and really started learning what they did.
What did they do and how did they do it?
Yeah, my introduction was on the community side early. There was a summer league event that Nike ran across some of the major cities across the country. The generic term was Pro-Am, but we ended up kind of changing the name and calling it Pro City. Mm-hmm. But they were in major markets: Atlanta, New York, DC, Minneapolis, Houston, the Bay Area. I ended up having that responsibility in terms of ordering all of the product: shirts, T-shirts, shirts, jerseys, socks, balls, you name it. I ordered everything and paid for it out of my Pro City budget. So I became kind of the overseer of this summer league.
Gotcha.
And it was a community give back because there was no fee, and it gave kids a chance to see pro guys up close and personal who may not have had a chance or couldn't afford to, pay for NBA tickets.
Right.
And so I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to get these kids involved and give them firsthand access to some high profile guys. So we did all the ordering. We did the brochures. We struck a deal with, I believe, Finish Line. So they started carrying, in limited quantities, some Pro City product. We created shoes with the logos on it. So again, it became my baby, right? So I ended up kind of self-proclaimed director of Pro City. So that was my introduction. And then the recruiting aspect of it was second piece.
Define recruiting. When you say recruiting.
So really identifying the players in the market, because I had moved from South Carolina to Chicago. They wanted me in the Midwest. And so my region was everything in the Midwest. So I needed to know who the high profile players at the high school level were, who the high profile players were at the college level in that region, and who were our existing assets, guys that were already under Nike contract.
You say assets. Was that a term that Nike used? Not
really. They would say endorsers of the product.
Okay. Just found that interesting that you use the term asset.
Well, that's how I view it, because that's ultimately it is an asset. It's an asset.
No. I get it, but
they were referred to internally as endorsers.
Yeah.
And so I needed to know what guys were with competing companies whose contracts may be up or who weren't happy with their existing relationships.
Being Adidas.
Yes, being Adidas, being New Balance, being N1 at the time, being the up-and-coming China companies, Li Ning and Anta. All of those companies were kind of in formulation. And so knowing who was doing what with who. And so it's really an intel gathering job.
Yep.
And so you want to know, for example, if a player had family issues, if mom and dad weren't together, who was actually making the decisions?
Sure.
If mom had a boyfriend, how involved was he? If the kid's high school coach had already struck a deal with an agent. All of those kinds of factors were part of the intel gathering process that I needed to be able to take back to the hierarchy at the time. Because at that time, again, I was just a rep.
Yeah. As you were going through this process, did you, as a player, was your recruitment fairly traditional, like, home visits, nothing under the table? It was pretty straight up, I'm assuming?
Well, I'll say this. There's nothing traditional about anything in the space.
Your recruitment.
No, but I'm saying there's nothing traditional about mine or anybody else's that's recruiting, because every family dynamic is different. Every situation from a recruiting standpoint is different with a particular kid and his family. So that's why the business is what it is.
Then I'm going to flat out ask you, did Clemson offer you money to go to Clemson?
They did not. No, okay. I did have some schools that offered me money to transfer or to come out of high school. I did.
My point is that's pretty traditional. You didn't get
it. Yes, absolutely.
That's what I'm talking about.
But in terms of your first question about Nike, you become Santa Claus. So for those who are listening who don't know, I've written a book called Black Market, and I kind of detail the product as kind of leverage in these relationships. So Nike, Adidas, the other shoe companies become ingrained and an influential part of that family circle with this high profile player, because I'm the product man. I'm Santa Claus, right? Mom needs some shoes and a sweatsuit. She's getting them.
Again, I'm going to interrupt you from time to time. When did it hit you that, this is different than my recruitment to Clemson? There's a lot more involved. Or did you know that when you were playing at Clemson? Did you know that?
I knew that because I had some high profile. I had the sixth pick in the draft on my college team. And so seeing, I would go home with Sharon and knew his family situation. He didn't come from a wealthy background. He didn't come from a mediocre background. His family was struggling. His mom was struggling to take care of him.
Right.
And he had 2 cars,
right.
And he always had money, and we took trips together, and he always had gas money. I mean, it was evident that he was being taken care of from somewhere. Now, again, who that was, and that wasn't any of my business, and I never asked. We never discussed it. It wasn't important to me. Right. He was my roommate. He was my teammate. He was my friend.
I just wanted to state to the audience, at what point did you know or feel that recruiting to major colleges could entail some things that were considered illegal at that point?
I would say I knew it when I was in high school. I knew it existed and I knew it happened. Mm-hmm. But I didn't see it. Again, I didn't see it for myself until I got to college my freshman year.
There you go. Now, fast forward, you're at Nike. When did you feel either pressured or obligated to offer things to players?
Well, I would never say I felt pressure, right? I think when you get into the job, you realize that's the job and you do your job. It was never somebody's pressuring me to do something that I don't agree with. I never felt like anybody said, hey, if you don't do this, because that was the job. Everybody in my department was sending product to kids, families, and parents, and paying for hotel rooms for camps because the parents couldn't afford to come see their kids play. And I never saw a problem with any of that.
Right.
Like if a parent and a family member want to come see their kid play and you're providing food and a hotel room, I don't really care what the rules are. There's nothing wrong with that. And so and again, going back to college, I had teammates who had children. I had teammates whose parents never saw them play in 4 years because they couldn't afford to get there. They couldn't afford to stay if they got there, and they couldn't afford to eat if they got there.
Right.
So I actually had teammates whose family members would stay with my mom and dad to avoid hotel costs, and my mom and dad would feed them.
Yep.
And so guys are out stealing food, and I mean, again, you see all kinds of stuff when guys are in need. But you're asking them to go make you millions of dollars because of these TV contracts and shoe deals and monies that are being paid all over the place, and the workforce is struggling.
Right.
And so, I to answer your question fairly, I never saw it as something, anything of an obligation or any kind of pressure. It's the right thing to do. So
right
I don't
thing to do, and regardless to NCAA rules,
it's the right thing to do by kids and their families when these kids are in need. And their families are in need, and you're benefiting in numbers that people can't even imagine. And you got families of people sleeping on floors with no furniture, and you want them to come play. Like again, I talk about this, Matt, and you'll resonate with this. When I was in school, we got one meal a day on Saturdays and one meal a day on Sundays. One. Now I don't know how it was in Carolina, but we got one meal, and now, through the week, you got 3 meals, Monday through Friday. But Saturdays, the calves were closed. So you had to figure out how to eat. Even though you got practice, you got to figure out how to eat outside of breakfast on Saturday and breakfast on Sunday. You on your own. So now I just told you kids come from backgrounds where they don't have furniture. Now you're asking them to figure out how to eat. And then you make it against the rules for somebody to give them $20 to go get a pizza.
I get it. I want to establish a couple things and then move forward. You and Nike knew that technically by providing families with gear, hotels, and food technically made them a professional, which made them ineligible.
Yes.
But yet Nike was sponsoring these colleges and coaches.
Yes.
So you're kind of, I don't want to say in the middle, but maybe in the middle, you know, that they know that it's against the rules technically, and yet they're doing it to get close to these players, to steer them ideally towards these colleges that they sponsor. And then long-term game was to get them, if they were good enough, to be pros. Is that?
Well, yes, that is very accurate, except for, and when I say long game, yes, you would love to have an iconic player coming out of your ranks. But you got to realize there's the money flows from the high school level through the collegiate level. So, you know, if I sponsor North Carolina, where you were a hell of a player as a shoe company, and my logo is on your jerseys, well, when you go buy those jerseys, we make money.
Right.
When you buy those shoes that you see the players on the floor wearing, we make money. That's why you see these $200 million relationships with these universities.
Yep.
Because again, it's such a big business. So we make more. There'll be more money made off of jersey sales, sock sales, shoe sales at the collegiate level.
Gotcha. Okay.
Than there will be from an individual NBA player.
Okay, that's good because that clarifies it even for me. And I was in the business for 22 years, and that makes sense. So that's the business model. Yeah. So fast forward. You left Nike. Why did you leave Nike after, I believe, 14 years?
So not quite 14, but close. It was about, I'm going to say 12 and a half, 13 years. It was time to go. I had been in the role. I basically was on the NBA side of the business from 2002 to 2010. And in 2010, I was basically told if I didn't take this grassroots job, the next promotion that came my way, I would probably be passed up for. And so I was kind of in a bit of a quandary, right? And so I was not really comfortable because I never wanted to jump into the grassroots space. I enjoyed the NBA side. I had become very friendly with a lot of the NBA GMs and scouts and front office people. I knew the agents. I knew who was recruiting what kid out of college and who was going where. So I kind of had my information network established, and I was pretty good at it.
What is the grassroots level?
The grassroots level is anything considered amateur, truthfully. But in terms of, to be really specific, you're really talking about high school level down to around 10 years old. From 10 to 17 is really considered grassroots.
And why would you want that role?
Well, because I know it's a cesspool. Yeah. And I know all of the dealings that go on. And I knew there was a lot of power struggle internally between who was really making the calls and bringing in organizations. And so there's so many dynamics in that space. And it was just something that never really interested me. And I was like, yeah, I don't really want to jump into that.
Talk more about what is the cesspool.
So you'll have guys who, again, hierarchy at a shoe company who may not serve in the role. So let's just say you have a guy who's on title said he's the director of grassroots basketball. But the global director of basketball is saying, hey, you're going to bring in this organization and you're going to spend money in this particular space because we have a deal with this particular college or university and this is their recruiting base.
Gotcha. So give me an example when you say bring in an organization. I know what you're talking about, but help the audience understand.
Sure. So during the spring and summer months, people typically refer to it as AAU basketball. Yep. And that's not actually the correct terminology. AAU is the amateur is an athletic association that is a business entity unto itself. AAU is a standalone business, the generic term for spring and summer basketball. Well, the shoe companies have basically gone around AAU because they have something to offer in terms of product and have called their teams travel teams.
Right.
And so now what you have is competing shoe companies out recruiting the best summer travel teams in respective markets, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and in each of the basketball-centric states, to really have the majority of the talent in a particular state on their sponsored travel team, if that makes sense. So Adidas is out recruiting guys for their sponsored travel teams. Puma is doing the same. N1 was doing the same at one point in time. Nike does the same.
What does sponsorship look like? I'm an AAU. I'm a travel team coach. Yeah. All right. I've got good players. I'm getting access to good players. What does that sponsorship look like for me and my program? Team Doherty?
Yeah, so it depends on the market that you're in, and it depends on the caliber of player, because good player doesn't signify getting a higher end deal. Good players are guys that are going to high-level D2 schools and low to mid-major schools. Those are good players. Those wouldn't constitute a travel team deal from a Nike perspective, right? Guys who are going to your Power 5 conferences and who have chances to be NBA players constitute high-level deals. Yep. Matt Doherty has high level players that are going to ACC, SEC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 schools, right? Then that deal will constitute a cash influx of, let's just say, somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $150,000. That would be
a year to me
to the organization, which are nonprofits. Mm-hmm. That money is to be disseminated amongst the number of teams you have, because again, some of these teams have 17s, 16s, 15s, down to 8s, right? 8-year-old teams. And so they have to make some budgetary decisions as to how they allocate those dollars and which age groups are going to pay for their summer travel, and which teams are going to use the sponsorship dollars. Also within that deal, there'll be product allocations. Right. And so that'll be a set number of uniforms, set numbers of socks, bags, balls, book bags, sweatsuits, hats, in winter and cold places like Detroit and Chicago. They'll have winter coats in those deals, gloves, things that Southern teams don't typically need. There'll be some of these guys will have, let's say, 5,000 T-shirts in their deal because they run camps. So they'll take those deals take those T-shirts, run their own camps, and sell those T-shirts to make money. And so again, it's a business.
Yep.
And so those deals, and then what you have is a circuit that is created by those same shoe companies. If you're under contract, I'll have 5 to 7 sponsored events that you are expected to play in. And so you and your team need to be physically present at these particular events. It is mandatory for you to attend these 5 events from March to July.
Now I think people have the picture, okay? Youth basketball, and, I could be just an average Joe who's got a relationship with a guy who's going to be a hell of a player, like, say, Anthony Davis out of Chicago. All of a sudden, I'm putting some players around him. You want Anthony Davis. I've got Anthony. You then sponsor my team. Now, that gives me tremendous leverage, right?
Does. Yes.
And so now I'm feeling pretty good about myself as I walk around the streets of Chicago and I try to build a program, and I'm getting $150K plus product. And now I'm kind of like Santa Claus in the neighborhood.
Well, now you are Santa Claus, because now what you do is you will take Anthony's parents, because he's the example. Mm-hmm. You'll take his parents and make sure that they don't pay for flights or hotels throughout the entire spring and summer.
That's right. Because if I'm with Nike, Adidas is trying to get to Anthony now that he's discovered.
Right.
I'm not letting Anthony and his parents out of sight.
No, and what you won't do for them, somebody else will.
That's right.
And so what gives the AAU guy or the high school coach even more leverage is now, because you do have Anthony Davis and he's a high profile kid. Well, here comes the agent. So the agent says, okay, AAU coach Matt Doherty, I tell you what, I'm gonna give the family, $250,000, and I'll put an extra $100,000 in the program.
Wow.
Here comes the financial guys. And listen, we want to sponsor the team. We'll give you guys an extra $100,000 if we can have access to Anthony and manage his money as a pro.
And none of that, by the way, to the audience, is illegal.
Not to put money into an AAU program. No, it's not.
No, it's not illegal. And some of this could be at the direction of a college coach, right?
A lot of it is at the direction, because they have a step. Because what people fail to realize is each coach has an agent.
That's right.
And so there's relationships established where if a particular college coach has a high-profile player, say an Anthony Davis, and they have an agent, and their agent says, "Hey, I'd love to get a chance to knock this to represent this kid," then what happens sometimes, and I'm not saying all the time, but what happens is there's influence placed on the kid, and the relationship is kind of handed over. And what will the relationship with the agent and coach? Coach says, "Well, listen, I'm giving you high-profile players. I'm supposed to pay you, 4 to 7 to 10% of my contract.
Right.
I'm not paying that because I'm giving you access to high-profile players." So it's a revolving door of business.
It's just, and all right, that's good. I wanted to lay the landscape for the fan who's getting ready, who's been watching March Madness and thinking that those kids on the court were just recruited because you called the high school coach, you met with them, they took a visit, the kid committed, and everyone's happy.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The crap that goes on behind the scenes, and you use the cesspool, I use it as well.
Yes.
It is a cesspool to get the kids from their high school playground travel teams to the court for an NCAA tournament game. The stuff that goes on from point A to Z, you can write a book about, which you did. And tell us about that book again. Just give us the title and how they can buy it.
Yeah, the name of the book is Black Market. It's available on all of your major outlets at Barnes & Noble or Amazon or Apple. There's an audio book, there's a hardback, and there's a paperback edition that's coming out next month. And the book really was cathartic for me in a sense of being able to talk about the truth. Because what I found about my situation is the truth doesn't matter. And so I wanted to put myself in a situation where I could speak the truth about how this business actually works. And then how, the justice system isn't really just at all. The other point I want to make, Matt, about the NCAA and the cesspool, and it kind of gets into some of the book process, but we talk about the coaches. And so.
No, I'm getting ready to go there. Let's fast forward to Louisville. You're now at Adidas.
Let me back up, though, because I want to make this point before you get into Louisville. What I was going to say was the majority of coaches at the collegiate level at your Power 5 schools are white. there are a number of black assistant coaches at Power 5 institutions. These black coaches' jobs, and you and I talk about the cesspool, but understand these guys' livelihoods are associated and attached to their ability to go recruit these black kids. And so what happens more times than not is these black assistant coaches are have to go get black kids and black talent to fill out their roster so that they can keep their jobs and be useful. That's the name of the game from a coaching perspective. I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, listen, when I was coaching, it went from, you could have some all white staffs to all of a sudden, I hated the term. Who's your black guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Who's your black guy on the staff?
Yeah.
What do you mean, who's my black guy?
Yeah. And
so I purposely, when I became a head coach, I hired 2 African Americans.
Sure.
Because I didn't want, and one was my ops guy.
Right.
David Kayson. And I'm like, I hired David because he's good, not because he's a black guy who can get players. Matter of fact, he wasn't allowed to recruit at that point. So right. I understand. You go back to Adidas now after some time off because you didn't take that grassroots job. You left.
No, I did take the grassroots job, and okay. I never fully answered your question in terms of why I left.
Okay.
I left because I was told that because I didn't want to take the job, but I accepted it because I was kind of pressured and saying I wouldn't receive another promotion if it came my way. I had to move to Oregon to the corporate headquarters, but I was told that after 3 years of kind of straightening out the grassroots situation, that I'd be put back in Chicago and going back to my pro responsibilities. Well, I was going into year 5. And so I felt like they lied to me.
Sure.
And so I got pushed into the job because the scenario that we talked about earlier, the former grassroots director at Nike had sent some product to 2 kids at Oklahoma, which again was standard procedure, but you sent it to the coach or you sent it to the kid's parents. You didn't send it directly to the kids because that was the violation,
right? Which
is ridiculous. If I'm gonna send it to you, I'm sending it to you. I'm just sending it to somebody else. I don't understand the difference in the violation, but whatever. The product was sent directly to the kids' dorm rooms, and their compliance folks got a hold of it and made a big stink about it. And so they ended up basically terminating the guy who was running the grassroots program.
Gotcha.
But he was doing his job. He just sent it to the kid's address versus sending it to the coach,
right?
Who was asking for the product. Because that's how coaches recruit. They call you and say, hey, can you send my kid these new Jordans because it'll help me recruit him? Right. And you got a $200 million relationship with the school. So you do what you're supposed to do to help the school. So anyway, I was going into year 5. I was not real happy with the fact that they had not put me back and been people of their word. And some of the decisions that I had made in terms of bringing in programs or trying to restructure deals was not met kindly. And it was just, I was frustrated. And I was like, you know what? I probably should exit. Yep. And so that was ultimately why I ended up leaving.
Okay. We've got a little over 30 minutes, and I just want to get to kind of the next level. Okay. You get back into the business at Adidas, and you are involved in trying to get players to certain universities, and you're between programs and players. Yep. As you said in the opening, you're the center of the cesspool. Everyone needs you, and you have a great reputation. Yep. I mean, I had you in speed dial. I mean, I knew that if I wanted some information, I was going to get good information from you.
Right.
You know? And you were a respectable guy in the industry with people that were not so respectable.
Yeah, and you had to be. You had to be able to kind of dive into.
Yeah, I had to dip into the gutter without getting dirty. Yeah. So I want to know, hey, Merl, what's going on? Do I have a shot at this kid?
Yeah.
Is it going to be a clean deal or not?
Yeah. And Matt, truthfully, the reason I was able to have that kind of reputation is because I would always tell guys the truth. Like, listen, and not waste your time and not put a family or kid in harm's way while doing it. So if you called and ask me that question, I say, listen, there's a lot of business around the kid. It's probably not something you want to get involved in.
There you go. That's all I need to leave it at that. And I move on. And I'm not going to rat that kid out. That sucks. I don't like it.
Right.
more and more it was happening. And then, I got fired at SMU, but it's dirty. You lose to programs, that are doing things differently. You can't just go out to the press and say, oh man, they're cheating, I'm not. And that's why I lost.
Right.
So you just take your medicine and either try to recruit a certain type of kid that comes from a background that that, parents have jobs. They value what you're offering in terms of education, and you could try to beat the other teams with maybe a little lesser talent, maybe better character, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
And so you get back into it, and you're at Adidas. And this is where the crap hits the fan. You facilitate, or you're in touch with a player by the name of Brian Bowen, his father, his family.
And so let me correct you, Matt. I don't know the kid. I've never spoken to the kid. I've never spoken to his father. I don't know this family at all. And that's why this whole thing stinks. So let me explain to you exactly what happened. I get back into the business. Again, I was the director of grassroots basketball for 4+ years at Nike. I had 48, I believe, travel teams under my watch. I had 10 to 15 staff, Nike staff under my watch. I managed a lot of people. I managed a $10 million budget. And
$10 million budget?
Yes, for my grassroots activities. For all of the camps, all of the grassroots programs, is $10 million budget. And so I was tired of managing people. I didn't want to do it anymore. It was long days and long nights, because you become the Dr. Phil of the business. Not only do I have parents and kids calling, I've got college coaches calling, I've got agents calling, I got AAU programs calling, I've got my own family stuff to deal with. Like, it becomes a never-ending cycle, and it's tiresome. And I got burned out. And so when I left Nike, I took a year off, and then the opportunity to just join Adidas as a consultant came. And I was like, you know what? This will be cool, because I don't have to manage anybody.
Right.
All I have to do is do my job and go home to my family. Right. So I thought it was a wonderful opportunity just to kind of get away from the extreme hustle and bustle. There's still some hustle and bustle, but not as much.
It defines your role at Adidas in terms of a consultant. What did that mean?
Again, back to the intel gathering, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding, again, I had a wonderful network of people who I could call and get information. I could go see an up-and-coming player. I knew the staffs at the Adidas sponsored schools. So it was a pretty easy transition for me, because I already had established relationships in the space. So finding out who was coming out of what program from a travel team perspective, or what high school player was really good in a particular market, and maybe I knew his aunt or his uncle, or maybe I knew his high school coach, it just gave me some ability to move a little bit easier, because I was now, again, back in the intel gathering space and talent identification space. That's all I was doing.
Right.
Assessing talent, identifying players, and then I started overseeing Adidas Nations, which was like the Nike Skills Academies.
Right.
And so I get a call from a young runner named Christian Dawkins, and he says, "Hey, man, I have a player who I'm really close to. His name is Brian Bowens. I've known the family. They're from my hometown. His aunt used to babysit me. Do you think Adidas will help me with the kid?" I don't know. I don't make those decisions for Adidas. All I can do is call and send your request in to those that make those decisions. I'm a consultant. I don't handle budget. I don't handle checks. None of that is in my purview, right? I do pass that information on to the hierarchy at Adidas. They come back to me and say they're going to call Louisville, see if that works for them. Do they want our help? I said, sure, yes. They say yes. I get a call back from those that I work for and say, hey, we need you to submit an invoice. And I said, okay, why am I submitting an invoice? They said, well, we normally do this through the travel teams to keep it clean, to keep the kid from NCAA violations. We'll do it through the travel team. They'll send the money to Christian Dawkins, who's the business manager. And that way the kid never touches any money and no problem. Okay. I do that. I send the invoice, and the next thing I know, I have the feds at my door. For a kid that I don't know and never had a relationship or contact with, doing my job.
Doing what you're told by the Adidas executives.
Yes.
September 26, 2017.
2017, yes.
That day will be like September 11th in some people's minds. It will be September 26th, 2017 in your mind, in your heart. There was a knock at your door. Tell us about that day.
Yeah, it was early morning, man. My wife was getting up for work, and she said, there's somebody knocking at the door. So I had somebody knocking at the door at 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning. That's kind of wild. So I get out of bed and go downstairs in my T-shirt and drawers, and guys, they surround. When I open the door, I see guys running across my front yard, and I can see them as I'm going to the door. I see guys running through the backyard. Well, they surrounded my house, and it was about 17 to 20 federal agents with their guns drawn around my house.
Where were you living at the time?
In Greenville, in Greer, back in South Carolina. Because once I left Nike, I moved from Oregon back to South Carolina. And the guy says, "Are you Merl Code?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "You're under arrest." And I said, "For what?" He said, "Money laundering." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Money laundering." And I said, "Laundering money from who? What are you talking about?" And so he went through this whole money laundering thing about how I took money from Adidas. And wait a minute, I said, I took money from Adidas that they sent me on a wire from Germany? What are you talking about? Like, it was really confusing. And so it was strange. But then I kind of got to the gist of it, man. They were trying to make a case. They had an informant that thought he had some information, didn't understand how the basketball space worked. And then when you realize that these young prosecutors make their names off of bringing cases,
yep.
Then you kind of get caught into this, okay, I'm okay with this because the truth will come out and I'll get to show, like, I didn't defraud anybody. I didn't take any money from anybody. Let's put the coaches on the stand. Let's put the ADs on the stand. Let's put the Adidas hierarchy on the stand. And none of that was allowed in the courtroom. And so they get to create a narrative that I'm a criminal because none of the evidence that was beneficial to me or the defendants, and mind you, 9 of the 10 guys that were charged were black. And all of the white guys who were supposed to be involved because they had money and power and schools backing them, they get to, walk free.
You're talking about mainly the coaches, right?
Yes.
Are you comfortable? I know you could Google it and see names. You're talking about, Sean Miller, Rick Pitino, Will Wade, Bill Self, those names.
Yep.
And all of those gentlemen, except I think Will Wade, are coaching right now, all probably making over $1 million a year.
Yeah.
At least.
Yep.
How does that make you feel?
It certainly helps me realize that I'm a black man in America. It helps me realize that the justice system works for those who have money and power and influence, and it doesn't work for those who really want to speak truth. It does not lend itself to folks of color for the most part. This is an interesting place that we live in, and I know people have a lot of American pride, and this is the best country in the world, and listen, I'm not anti-American by any stretch of the imagination, but right is right, truth is truth, and fair is fair. And this country has not lent itself to truth in a lot of instances, nor fairness, nor justice. And so it angers me that the truth was not allowed in the very place that is supposed to matter the most, which is the court of law.
Tell us, a little deeper dive when we got about 20 minutes left.
Sure.
What wasn't allowed in court? Again, just to be clear, and why? What was the justification for not allowing it in court?
I'm not really sure I can give you the justification as to why it was not allowed in the court. I can just tell you what, some of the things that were not allowed. And as I kind of said to you earlier, there are presidents, the ADs, and the college coaches. We tried to subpoena and have them testify. They did not allow the coaches, nor the ADs, nor the presidents of these universities to testify. What they did was they put their compliance people on the stand who have no idea about anything that goes on in this business. We had the judge. We weren't allowed to put the FBI agents on the stand. Come to find out, the FBI agent was dirty himself, ended up getting indicted and having a 3-month prison sentence. They changed his conviction from a felony to a misdemeanor. There's so many there's so many things in this case that text messages I have, and if you read the book, I have actual text messages and wiretap phone calls from the University of Kansas saying, hey, whatever we got to do to get him here and they're talking about Zion because they knew I had a relationship with
Zion Williamson, who was an All-American high school player from South Carolina who played at Duke for a year.
Yes.
And went on.
He's an NBA All-Star, right? And so I have a recorded message, recorded conversation from their associate head coach, and it says, hey, man, what do we have to do to get him here? We'll do whatever we got to do to get him here for 8 months. Now, they're telling me this on the phone. And they say in that conversation, hey, we'll just tell your boss at Adidas to put some money into the travel team. Now, this is on wiretap. Not allowed into the courtroom.
Why? How did they say that?
Man, you have to ask legal eagles why. I don't know. I'm just telling you, this whole court case was a sham.
Now, your dad is a lawyer and a judge, or was a judge.
Yes.
So you, I'm assuming, were getting good advice. Did he assist in this process, or did you have outside counsel?
Yeah, he was very much involved and very as helpful as he could be. And he basically said to me, Merl, they're fucking you. Excuse my language. He said that, but they're, and I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. I know we're live.
Oh, it's okay. No. Listen, this is a podcast. You say whatever you want.
He said they're fucking you. And he said, listen, I've never seen a case where you couldn't put the folks on the stand. You say I took something from somebody unbeknownst to them, and I can't put them on the stand. Like I've never. He was frustrated because he said, these guys come up with all this federal mess that says you can't put people on the stand, and then you lie to the jury and say we had equal access to all. The judge lied to the jury and said we had equal access to all witnesses when you just told us we couldn't put the coaches or the FBI on the stand. So how do we have equal access? Like it was a sham. But again, when you have corporate entities with a lot of money and a lot of influence and a lot of power, the truth doesn't matter.
And this was taking place in New York City?
Yes. And
you went to jail?
I did.
How long?
5.5 months.
I can only imagine the anger, the despair, the helplessness.
Yeah.
When they sentenced you to prison and you actually had to show up, what was that like? How'd you feel?
I mean, it's certainly, again, man, it's a constant reminder of me being a black man in this country. And when you get there and you start seeing guys who are in similar situations, who've been railroaded or who've been, accused of certain things that they didn't do and weren't allowed to defend themselves in a place where it should have mattered the most, it's certainly frustrating. And certainly it's not a pleasant experience. I went in with the mindset that I was going to have to figure out how to survive and come out, and restart my life in some capacity because they've taken my livelihood away for something that I didn't do. I've become toxic. I can't, college coaches can't touch me. They can't speak to me because it puts them in harm's way. And this is a self-preservation type business, right? And so I'm not angry at that. I mean, I certainly understand. I'm disappointed that so many guys that I did so many things for in the space didn't stand up and say, hey, man, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. Like, I literally got charged with bribery because I got invited to a meeting and was told I'd be paid a consulting fee. And I took my consulting fee for showing up. And they said it was a bribe. And I said, I don't understand how that works. How? And I have another recorded conversation where I'm telling the FBI agent, hey, man, you're not paying any of my coaches. These are my friends. These guys will show up at a meeting because I asked them to. But again, not allowed into the courtroom.
This podcast is called the Rebound Podcast, and it's all about, I like to say, what's your rebound? So you have this very nice career and high profile, well respected. You get in this crossfire with the NCAA, the New York DA, federal prosecutors, go to jail for something, oh, by the way, that now is basically legal with the NIL, right?
Right.
I mean, how does Merl Code, how do you rebound? How do you come back from that and gain some peace, some traction, livelihood?
It's a good question, man. I don't know. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out. Again, I've been blessed and fortunate to have some really good relationships with people as yourself. And Larry Shyatt, who was one of my favorite people on earth. Larry was my assistant coach in college, became the head coach at Clemson in Wyoming, was with the Dallas Mavericks for a number of years and is now retired. But one of my favorite people on earth. And so I've been blessed and fortunate to have guys like Larry and yourself in my corner, just from a relationship standpoint to help me kind of navigate what the opportunities could potentially be for what's next. I really don't know. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm a try to be a faithful servant of the man upstairs. Mm-hmm. And I believe that this happened for a reason. And I know it's to help these young men and young women find truth and able to earn dollars for themselves, which is starting to happen. I still think it's a sham in terms of name, image, and likeness. I still think it's a form of slavery and indentured servitude when I have to ask somebody, and forgive me, but I have to ask some white guy at some school, can I use my name or can I use what I look like to earn monies for myself? Can I use my abilities? Can I please, sir? Right. It's bullshit. And so I don't really know. Again, I've got some irons in the fire, man, and we'll see kind of where it goes.
So when did you get out of prison?
July 27th.
July 27th of 2022?
Yes. And
what have you been doing since then? What's your day-to-day like?
Day-to-day is just, again, reaching out to people, doing podcasts as this, helping promote the book as much as I can. Again, talking to guys in my circle about opportunities that are upcoming, and prayerfully, man, something will happen. Someone will see some value in something that I've done, said, a relationship, and hopefully I can kind of get back on track from a career perspective.
What's it done to your family?
In a really positive way. My wife and I have always been really, really close, and she's my best friend, but it brought us closer. Uh-huh. I think sometimes when you're away and, you go through things with somebody, you don't really realize how much you value them until they're not there. Mm-hmm. And so I think from a family perspective, man, I think it brought us a lot closer together. I think, we've buckled down, and, it hasn't been easy. But fortunately, we're not in a place where we're worried about eating tomorrow, but, we're not in the place that we were before all this happened either. So, but it's definitely been a strain on my mother and father emotionally, because I know it's hard to watch your child go through something like that. Yeah. It's been a strain on my wife emotionally, but it's brought us closer together. And so I'm grateful that it opened my eyes to those who are in my circle who have stood by me through this and who know the truth.
As a player, you always dream, right? You dream about hitting game-winning shots. You dream about playing D1. You dream about winning a championship. What do you dream about now that could maybe hopefully materialize in your mind, saying, you know what, I think I could fit here and add value if only somebody could open that door for me?
Yeah, I think, I certainly would love to have an opportunity at the NBA level, because college is out, right? Because now I'm a convicted felon, so I could never work in the college space. But I certainly would have, with somebody that understands my situation or really knows the truth. I'd be hopeful that somebody at the NBA level would find some value in something that I brought to the table. Someone internationally at the pro level would see some value in terms of what I bring to the table from, again, having some experiences in all aspects of the game, whether it be teaching or whether it be evaluation. I'd love to be around the game in some aspect, if at all possible. I still love the game. I just don't like the business of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. A friend of mine said in the NBA, beautiful game, shitty business. Right. So, have you come across any people from your past, like a Pitino, a Sean Miller, Bill Self?
No, I'm not. And again, I don't even know Pitino. I have no relationship with Pitino. We've only said hello to each other. And that's why I said this whole case stinks, because I don't know him either. No. I don't know the Bowen family. I don't know Pitino. Again, the most I've ever done to that man is said, hello, how you doing, coach? Mm-hmm. So whatever business arrangements were made without me. I wasn't around for them. They were made above my pay grade. But again, that's, Bill has a job. He's got a family. I don't like the fact that none of these guys were forthright enough or man enough to say, hey, this is what happened and, whatever. But it's not for me to deal with. They got to see the man upstairs for themselves one day. And so that'll be their time to deal with it. For now, if I did come across them, there's nothing to be said. I mean, they didn't bring the court case against me. They just didn't tell the truth. Right. They didn't have to tell the truth. They weren't forced to tell the truth. They just stayed away from
an opportunity to tell the truth.
Right. Exactly.
A couple last questions. Will you watch the NCAA tournament?
No.
With what you know, the NCAA's broken. How can it be fixed? If you were the president of the NCAA or head of a basketball committee,
it needs to be dissolved. I mean, because here's the problem with it is it's a farce. And the NCAA makes 95+% of their monies annually off of March Madness. They make $1 billion+ off of 3.5, 4 weeks of basketball. Mm-hmm. And because football has become such a powerful entity, they don't get any of the football revenue. That's why there's for those of your listeners who don't understand the business, football, that's why football has all these bowl games and basketball does not. The NCAA still controls the revenues from the basketball perspective because they've created this March Madness iconic event. Well, football has said, hey, man, you go screw yourself. You're not taking any of our revenue. Right. And so it's become a corporate rush to see who can sponsor these big-time bowl games. And so understanding the business of it, it needs to be dissolved, period. And these kids need to be in an open, fair, and free market where, hey, these coaches can change jobs, so can kids.
So you think they should still have college basketball, but it's just a different model where it's like maybe an NBA draft?
Yes.
We could go on and on. How do people, if they want you to get on a podcast, speak in an event, just reach out to you? Merl, how do they do that?
So a couple of ways. I can be reached through my publisher, my literary agent, Matt Carlini, Carlini. And his email is Carlini, Carlini at javelindc, D as in David, .com. Or the guys who I have to give a lot of credit to for helping me put the book in place, Eric Elston. His email is Eric at core, CORE, managementgroup.com. Those are the two ways guys can get a hold of me to do any kind of podcast or speaking engagement.
Merl, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you sharing. I'm sorry you went through what you went through. I hope you continue to rebound. It's a process. It doesn't happen fast.
Sure.
I've been through something, but not as bad. I mean, but it's all relative. And, it's all about how do you deal with adversity, setbacks, failure, and how do you rebound? And because there's a lot of people out there that go through a lot of stuff. And when they hear your story, hopefully it'll inspire them to keep moving forward as you have done in your journey. So, Merl, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Take care.
Leadership is a learned behavior. You're a leader, whether you're a parent, a coach, a business owner, or a friend. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. Thanks for listening. I welcome any and all feedback. You can reach me at dohertycoaching.com.